Happy Monday, everybody. It's November 20th, 2023 at 1:25 p.m. The devil is in the details. Vigilante stalking, organized stalking, criminals on patrol, the COPS program, the hidden evil state-sponsored terror campaigns. Well, we're going to continue reading the book Gang-Stalking and Mind Control, The Destruction of Society Through Community Spying Networks. And the chapters are not numbered. They're labeled. So I'm going to be reading this chapter, A Deeper Understanding of This Secret Network. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. Please hit the thumbs up, like, comment, share if you feel inclined to do so. And actually, it's so interesting because as soon as I started recording this, my video is moving a little bit. You see that? It's shaking a little bit. Gang-stalking groups derive their members from many sources, including government, military, business, religious, and criminal sectors of society. Members can be drawn into gang-stalking groups at any age, and there are even people who are born into it and come from a long line of generational members involved in a secret web of power and control that has existed for centuries. These members are usually from families with heavy military, political, or religious backgrounds. But this is not always the case. Many of these people grow up thinking that their secret activities are normal aspects of society. These people are often brought into these activities when they're younger than most, being put to use wherever and whenever they can be. They often become involved at a higher level later in life, either being trained as a group handlers or else used in some other capacity by the controllers. Some gang stalkers may not even realize that they're involved in anything that's evil, but what they're involved in is deeply satanic, and those people who are members of gang stalking groups are essentially serving an evil enterprise that is slowly creeping through the shadows of society and slowly taking it over. These gang-stalking groups exist at the very bottom levels of the hierarchical structure of power and control that rises to the very highest levels of society. Being at the bottom of this hierarchy, their efforts aren't necessary, but they're very useful and even entertaining to their handlers and controllers. Isn't that interesting, folks? So, like, the stalker neighbors are entertainment for their handlers and controllers. I don't know, I don't find them entertaining at all. But I guess to psychopaths, they are entertaining. Those who actually set up gang-stalking groups and direct their day-to-day activities occupy slightly higher levels within the pyramidal structure of power and control. These are the group handlers, and are often police officers, government employees, business operators, church officials, etc. No. Church officials? Police officers? No. I'm being sarcastic. These people are in turn directed by an even higher level within the structure, which is almost exclusively generational bloodline members. Those who are born into the satanic web of evil, and whose ancestors have served it under a number of generations. These are the real controllers of these groups, who always keep themselves at a safe distance from the actual groups and their gang-stalking activities. They don't want anybody to know how evil they are, who they are. They want to hide in the shadows. The vampires. These bloodline controllers come from families that are much more deeply involved in satanic activities and will often be active in business, religion, politics, the military, or intelligence. Scary, huh? At the very least, these families will have a history of involvement in politics and the military. The children of these families are raised from an early age using advanced methods of trauma-based mind control through satanic ritual abuse to assure they remain subservient to the higher levels of power that they are being brought into. These people will have multiple personalities, which I talked about earlier, and that is posted on the channel, folks. The non-bloodline controllers of these groups may not be involved in any satanic ritual activities of any kind, and probably aren't. But the bloodlines who control these groups at the highest level certainly are. Many of these gang-stalking groups are set up and controlled by people who are non-bloodline, but are heavily involved in satanic activities as well. They are interested in power and control, and have learned how to set up their own gang-stalking groups, which they use to punish those that cross them, or to exploit others for various purposes. Oh, they think they're God, right? They can punish those that cross them. How about punishing people they never met? Yeah. I think they just do it for fun. They have nothing else to do with their sorry lives. Mind control and Satanism go hand in hand. And gang-stalking groups are the perfect conduit for mind control research and applications. Those bloodline families that are involved in Satanism are also connected to the most advanced technologies, including the blackest of black projects of the military and intelligence organs, as well as secret technologies that may have been developed in the private sector. The military have been interested in mind control technologies since at least the 1920s. I would venture to say that you and I were not born in the 20s. My parents weren't even born in the 20s. And have been developing them ever since. These technologies end up in the hands of Satanists, because Satanism is strong throughout the ranks of the military and intelligence organs. Okay, I get what he's saying here. Organs is short for organizations. Okay? The intelligence organs, the intelligence organizations. As a new mind control technology is being developed, it needs to be tested. And this requires guinea pigs to test it on. Sometimes military personnel are used, but often ordinary citizens have become ensnared in these mind control experiments. The level of sophistication is so good that those who are developing these technologies and targeting the public can create a mind control slave that is totally unaware of being controlled and without the need to create multiple personalities through trauma. Oh, I guess they're still working on that with me, because everything about what's going on here is trauma-based. This opens up the possibility to enslave an entire population, which is their ultimate goal, and at the stage that they are at now, they're able to totally take over an individual's thoughts and actions and orchestrate that person like a puppet on a string whenever they wish. Just remember, folks, this book was published in 2011. Gang-stalking groups are the ideal conduit for proliferating this sort of technology, and it seems to be making the method of setting up these groups in the traditional way unnecessary, and a person's participation can be totally involuntary and unwitting, not knowing that they are being controlled and used in a gang-stalking operation. Well, that is the end of that chapter, folks. I'm going to read what witting and unwitting means. Okay? This chapter is a little bit longer. It is not at all unlikely that many gang-stalking activities are carried out by entirely unwitting parties, people who don't know that they're being used and manipulated to inflict calculated acts of psychological harassment or torture on a targeted person. There are two possible methods for orchestrating gang-stalking activities through unwitting parties instead of the traditional gang-stalking groups. The first of these methods incorporates electronic mind control technology such as implants and direct energy weapons, while the second method makes use of people with MPD, multiple personality disorder. Oh, well, thanks so much, criminals. Yes, I've got some implants and directed energy weapons used upon me and my animals. You criminals, you psychopaths, you losers, Satanists. In the first case, the unwitting gang stalker is electronically influenced to think or act in a certain way, whether towards the target directly or else in a way that indirectly affects the target, while they believe that they are acting by their own free will. In the second case, the unwitting gang stalker is purposely triggered in some way so that a switch in personalities takes place. And the alternate personality, being the witting party, takes over and acts out against the target. Once he or she has done so, the original personality is switched back again, leaving the person completely unaware of what they have just done. In the first case, hypnosis may also be used, sending triggers that induce a hypnotic state, giving commands telling the person what to do, and then using post-hypnotic suggestion to cause the person to not remember their actions afterwards. Both of these methods of using people for gang-stalking activities without their knowledge are probably being used extensively and increasingly at this stage of affairs. I don't know, the active shooters come to mind, folks. What do you think? There has been more and more information coming out over the years about the extensive reality of mind control technology, Satanism, and trauma-based MPD victims, many of whom are unaware that they may even have MPD, which is multiple personality disorder. A historical review of the origins and existence of these phenomena reveal that they stem from the same source and from the same ultimate purpose of complete and total domination and control of a population. This totalitarian ideology is satanic in nature, and this is where it originates. Trauma-based MPD is a very ancient method of creating controlled servants, quote unquote, and has been heavily employed in satanic groups for millennia. An example of using mind control technologies to involve unwitting participants in gang stalking activities follows. The scenario described is known as street theater, where seemingly coincidental events take place in public that are intended to negatively affect the target in some way, such as to frustrate or incapacitate him or her. These street theater operations usually involved a number of gang-stalking participants working in tandem and are carefully pre-planned. You hear that? Pre-planned. That is premeditated. Remember that word, premeditated. It exists in law. Pre-planned, premeditated, and orchestrated. It's my own observation that many of the participants in these street theater events don't seem to be at all aware that they're acting at the behest of a controlling party, and their actions seem to be completely unconscious and coincidental rather than consciously purposeful. This has led me to suspect that certain mind control technologies are being employed at these times against ordinary citizens who are not members of gang stalking groups but are being mind controlled and just happen to be at the right place at the right time. Imagine that you're walking down a fairly busy sidewalk on a normal day. As you walk, people seem to be continually cutting you off in your path, either suddenly crossing in front of you and forcing you to stop short, or converging around you and blocking your movement, or stepping out from behind obstacles or from around the corners just as you approach, or forcing you to step around them as they suddenly take up a position immediately in front of you, blocking your path. Even as you walk down an otherwise uncrowded sidewalk, the people just ahead of you who are walking in the same direction will shift to the left or right when you attempt to pass them on that side, effectively keeping you behind them. Unless these people are somehow being cued as to when to move as they do, there's no natural way for them to know the precise moment to do this on purpose. Having personally experienced these situations regularly and having made careful observations over time, I've been able to assure myself that these acts aren't happening to others as frequently as they're happening to me. They're a form of street theater. I've also been able to formulate a possible means that might have been employed for creating these situations around a target using whatever unwitting parties happen to be around the target at that time. This hypothesis is based on documented facts regarding current mind control technologies. To a person who is unaware of the extent of mind control technologies and their capabilities, the very idea that people could be unwittingly used in the following manner might seem ludicrous, but the fact is that subliminal suggestions can be beamed into a person's head, and both thoughts and physical movements can be influenced through them. The subliminal suggestions enter at a pre-conscious level of mental processing and are not consciously detectable, but the context of the suggestion rises up as what appears to be that person's own thoughts, similarly affecting physical movements such as slightly destabilizing a person's balance so that they suddenly begin moving to the right or to the left at the appropriate time, can be caused by beaming an electromagnetic signal at the person in order to affect their motor cortex in the proper manner. This can all be done via satellites and microwave towers. It's possible that computers, cell phones, and other commonly carried electronic gadgets are also equipped to pick up and amplify beamed signals. Beamed electromagnetic signals can affect a person in these ways are not just science fiction. Specific brain activity gives us specific brain wave signatures, and these can be recorded using similar technology to what an fMRI scanner uses. And once recorded, the same brain state can then be recreated by transmitting that recorded electromagnetic signature at a person. For lower level brain functions such as motor impulses, emotional states, and even pre-conscious thought processes, the signatures will be fairly uniform for all people. This is because these lower level brain functions developed early on in our evolution. Let me turn the page here. And are therefore much more or less genetically identical from person to person. Using the latest in laser technology coupled with the accuracy of GPS technology to pinpoint a target, even a person in a thick crowd of people can be influenced without affecting anyone else that happens to be standing nearby. Because every person also gives us their own unique electromagnetic signature, the ability to locate a specific person out of a multitude can be achieved rather easily. Once located, the person can be locked onto and then affected by beamed signals coming from either satellites or nearby cell phone transmitters. Using the person's unique signature to verify that the target is within the beam's trajectory, the appropriate brain wave signature is then transmitted, carrying with it the control frequencies. It's similar to how different radio stations can broadcast at their own specific frequency that carries the transmitted signals. These signals become the sound we hear from a particular radio station on the AM or FM dial of our radio, and the signal of one station doesn't affect the signals of another radio stations that broadcast other frequencies. With mind control technologies, the carrier wave for the signal, which is the broadcast frequency, would be a specific individual's unique signature, and only that person can receive the signals that are transmitted at that frequency because only that person is tuned into it. Other, less advanced forms of mind control technologies are more broad-based and target an entire group, such as a crowd of people or even an entire neighborhood or community. Technologies such as HAARP, HAARP, High Altitude Auroral Research Project, which is in Alaska, can affect an entire continent of people. I have a feeling that's what's going on here, folks. I'm sorry, like everybody's nuts out here. These broad-based technologies are used to affect a group of a population through their basic emotions and Smaller versions have been frequently used to manipulate crowds at sports events, during religious congregations, and at various types of public seminars and events. I'm just going to add, and concerts, some of these music concerts that you see in supermarkets and in shopping malls. They are very likely being used in television shows and movies as well. These technologies are used to induce specific emotions or influence certain behavior, either by broadcasting frequencies associated with specific emotions or by broadcasting subliminal verbal suggestions. This technology will influence a group of people to a certain degree, but not to the degree that is required to control individuals within the group without affecting the rest of the group. This makes these sort of broad-based mind control technologies not as useful for controlling gang-stalking groups, but are sometimes useful as a weapon against their targets. Frequencies that induce certain emotional responses can be broadcast at the target from a relatively small transmitter device planted around his home or workplace, which will affect the target whenever they are within its range, or the device can broadcast to the people around the target, such as neighbors or co-workers, to influence them to act in ways that will affect the target. Either of these types of mind control technologies that I have described, whether a broadcast signal that affects everyone in its range or a directed beam that only affects a single individual, can be remotely controlled automatically through computers and databases of signature frequencies that can be compiled. Here, let me turn this page. On the members of an entire population, so that with high-speed computer processing capabilities, such as the use of echelon, large numbers of people in a given area can be tracked and controlled simultaneously and automatically, making street theater situations possible without having to use organized gang-stalking groups. Instead, with a database containing the frequency signatures of every person in a given population, every person can be controlled individually and simultaneously and manipulated like puppets. Oh my goodness. As the current technology expands in its capabilities and the numbers of people who are able to be simultaneously controlled increases through hardware expansion, it will begin to be applied that much more, and gang-stalking groups will become obsolete as policing the population becomes totally electronic and computer automated. Oh, see, I guess these little stalker people, they're not going to be getting their income for much longer. Although this is 2011. These technologies are real, as are the capabilities I describe. A person can therefore be unwittingly used as a participant in gang-stalking activities. This sort of use of unwitting people as players in these activities will become more common as time goes on and new applications and methodologies are designed and implemented. The question naturally arises at this point as to why this technology is not just used on the gang-stalking targets directly and eliminate the need for gang-stalking groups to harass a person. The simple answer is that it sometimes is. However, it seems that the desire of the controlling parties is to establish a fascist society in which they have complete control of the population. And since this is not going to be achieved openly and with people willingly giving up their rights and freedoms, it's necessary to entrap the public within such a system by portraying the rest of the society as a threat and involving them in threatening activities against the rest of the population without them realizing that they're being manipulated against their will and acting against their own morals and beliefs. To do this, it is necessary to change people's perceptions so that the desired responses from them become completely voluntary and acceptable. The very conditions that are set up turn a perceived evil into a reality and perpetuate a growing fear. Furthermore, the intimidation factor involved in all of this is important to the controller's desired system, and the gang-stalking activities provide a means to intimidate not just the target, but the participants as well. Gang-stalking groups and the way they operate facilitate these ends in a number of ways. The mind control technologies are added into the mix out of convenience, since these groups give the controllers a means to test and experiment with them. Since this technology is so secret, however, those who operate it must be trusted parties who follow orders precisely and are properly trained in their use. This takes time and effort, and in many cases the gang-stalking participants just don't qualify. But they often qualify for being guinea pigs in mind control experiments, so these technologies are very likely being incorporated into these groups and their activities to a certain degree. At some point, these groups will be given the ability to use the technology on their targets, but it seems unlikely that the technology will be placed directly into the hands of ordinary citizens any time soon. At best, they may be given very limited access to it. Only those who are already completely mind controlled themselves and are therefore completely controllable might be given full access to mind control technology. It must also be taken into consideration that the purpose of these gang-stalking activities is not just to unnerve the target and make them look foolish or even crazy in public, or to frustrate or intimidate them, or punish them for some perceived misdeed. The deeper purpose is to coerce them into conforming, to force them to silently accept what is going on, and to break their will and draw them into taking part in this system of control. By causing many of those around a target to consciously or unconsciously act through mind control technologies in ways that seem natural, other than the fact that for the target they're occurring so often or for no apparent reason, the target will more likely be provoked to lash out in frustration as the situation escalates through increased occurrences. So anyone around the target will be clueless as to what the target is experiencing, and the target will appear to be delusional should he or she mention anything to anybody. The sense of isolation that often results due to a lack of anyone anywhere to turn for help is meant to break down the target and force his or her silent submission. With the advancement of mind control technologies, this can be achieved without the need for witting participants of gang-stalking groups to engage in their activities, and instead unwitting parties can be used to fulfill certain small actions within a larger orchestration of street theater or in other forms of harassment. If trauma-based mind control is also being heavily used to create alternate personalities, then depending on how relevant this is, we might be dealing with a large number of people who are multiples and unknowingly involved in this sinister web of control. A whole underground society might exist that's filled with such people without them even being aware of their involvement. The fact that the induced trauma that creates an alternate personality is never remembered by the original personality makes it impossible for a mind-controlled multiple to know that they went through a procedure to split their mind and that they are being controlled. A person only needs to be alone with the mind manipulators long enough for them to establish an alternate personality and program it with basic control mechanisms. And this might only take a few hours with advanced equipment and techniques. Recruits for this sort of mind control could easily be picked from hospital wards, prison populations, mental institutions, and military personnel. A person who goes into a hospital for some relatively minor operation might get the wrong doctor, who only needs to be isolated with the patients for a couple of hours while he applies electroshock treatment to induce a split personality before adding hypnotic triggers that can be used to later access the alternate personality. Such a trigger might be an electronic signal that can be beamed or broadcast. This would allow an entire group to be triggered simultaneously with a single trigger, or separately with different triggers. Even without creating an alternate personality, hypnosis can be used on its own to instill post-hypnotic suggestions. But by creating an alternate personality, the controller has a deeper and more permanent control. And what they have done is less likely to ever be discovered. Is that sinister or what, folks? Wow. Well, I'm going to keep reading the next chapter. I won't say it out loud. Okay, do you see that? Okay. Some gang-stalking groups are held together through homosexuality and other sexual deviances. Some of those people that get caught up in perpetuating gang-stalking activities are drawn into it only after having involved themselves in sexually deviant activities of which they are ashamed of and desire to keep secret. For instance, many of these people, being otherwise lonely, might initially fall into association with a gang-stalking group out of an innocent desire for simple companionship to break the monotony of their lives. They begin by associating with one of the gang stalkers of the same sex, who befriends them and begins to warm up to them. They begin to spend a good deal of time together, and soon enough, a situation arises where they're alone together, and the initiate is slowly and methodically coerced into experimenting sexually with the gang-stalking member. This may be very mild at first, nothing more than a suggestive comment dropped now and then, or some other subtle hint. These acts play on the mind of the initiate, who is being monitored very closely while this is going on, and who over time continues to experience more of these suggestive incidences with their quote-unquote new friend. It is hoped that the initiate will begin to contemplate the possibility of getting some sexual gratification that they lack on their own lives. At first, they may be reluctant and unsure of themselves. But if they have a strong need to feel loved and accepted, and because their friend, quote-unquote, makes them feel confident that anything that happens will remain a secret between them, oh yeah, right, the target begins to weaken. When this weakness is observed through close monitoring, the next step is taken to draw them further into the trap. This could be like a honeypot situation, folks. In order to persuade the initiate further, they may even be introduced to the fact that others within the group take part in these sexual activities, and it's acceptable within their little circle. If possible, there will be a few members of the opposite sex involved, and the possibility that the initiate can have sex with these members will be suggested to them. But they will find that it will be expected to have sex with one of the members of their own sex first. If the initiate is unwilling to involve themselves in this sort of activity, they'll find themselves suddenly excluded from the group, or their new friend, quote-unquote, will distance themselves from the person. Meanwhile, the group will make an effort to let the initiate sink into their sudden return to loneliness while witnessing the group as much as possible, as they are obviously enjoying the benefits of each other's company. The initiate will want to be part of the group, and will perhaps have a weak moment and eventually decide to give in, at which point they'll be invited back into the group. At this point, whether or not the initiate is even curious about experimenting with homosexuality, they're ready to give in to trying it. The gang-stalkers will be ready for this, and they will set the stage for blackmail. They'll have hidden cameras and microphones set up at whatever location the initiate's encounter will take place, and the initiate will be recorded in the act without their knowing. Once the initiate has been drawn into this first experience, they will either feel too ashamed of themselves to want to do it again, or they'll feel more open to doing it again when they see that the group accepts them even more so afterwards. So if the target is willing to continue experimenting, They'll be drawn into more and more perverse acts, all of which will be secretly recorded. If they're not open to involving themselves any further in the group's activities, threats of blackmail will be used and even carried out until they comply. Either way, they'll be drawn into taking part in certain activities because of something that they don't want made public knowledge. For this reason, the assurance will always be given that anything they do with their new friends and the rest of the group will be kept a secret as long as they continue to cooperate in other ways. I don't know, it sounds a little extortion-like to me, too. The new friend will let them know that they also don't want their homosexuality to become public knowledge, and this will build trust between them that neither of them will ever disclose to anyone else what the two of them do in private. Of course, the new friend from the group will usually know, or at least suspect, that any of these activities are being recorded. And even though they may not truly want to be publicly found out to be homosexual either way, they will have already been blackmailed, just as they are helping to blackmail the initiate. They'll already have gone through the same sort of procedures and will have been threatened with exposure if they don't also draw the initiate into a similar blackmail situation. This is how many gang-stalking groups are bound together and kept from exposing what they've gotten themselves into. Well, that's really interesting, guys. The initiate, having been secretly recorded performing these acts, I'm not going to even say the word, will next be informed that they have been recorded and may even be shown the recordings to assure them of the fact. This will put the initiate in a position of feeling entirely helpless to threats of blackmail. And at this point, will begin to be introduced to more of the deeper activities of the gang-stalking group. The initiate will begin to be called on to perform little tasks for the group, taking their directions from the group, and never fully knowing why these activities are being done or who's directing the group to do them. However, it will eventually become apparent that the group is not working on its own initiative, but is part of something larger. It should be realized from all of this that closet homosexuality is a big part of what keeps some gang-stalking groups bound together and able to continue operating in secrecy. But there are those people who aren't so inhibited about their sexuality and will sooner or later not be so fearful of it being publicly known and might even like the idea. For this reason, these acts that go on between members of the groups are continuously stepped up if they show any signs of losing their inhibitions. For instance, an initiate or gang-stalking member who is found not to be concerned enough about keeping these activities secret will be coerced into greater immoral acts, whatever it is that goes too far over the edge for their comfort. This might involve being made to engage in criminal activity, violence, rape, bestiality, playing with or even eating things that come out of your bottom parts, anything that is so deplorable that most people would be shocked to learn about it. One method that those who run such gang-stalking group might use to test the strength of a member subservient to them is to constantly threaten them with exposure and to gauge their response. If the member shows any signs of unconcern for whatever they might be blackmailed with, they'll be immediately set up in some sort of situation that will concern them. Since those who ultimately control these groups have power throughout society, this situation might be anything at all, such as the sudden loss of employment, illness, financial problems, theft, assault. Whatever the situation is, it will leave the member at the mercy of their controllers. And this will be made clear to them in some way. As soon as the person shows that they are willing to continue to cooperate, the problem or problems will be corrected. Few of the male gang stalkers that were not originally homosexual will become outwardly so after joining the group, and will tend to keep the fact well hidden. They'll often act overly masculine in some way, as though in compensation for those secret activities, and will usually have one or more male associates who they tend to spend a great deal of time with. These associates will be fellow gang stalkers, whether within the same group or from separate groups that may or may not know about each other. When trying to turn, quote unquote, someone into a gang stalker through homosexual blackmail, the controllers will often manipulate situations so that targeted males are unable to meet women and instead are encouraged to bond closely with other males in the gang stalking group. Over time, the target's male companions will make suggestive comments and subtle actions that are intended to arouse the target and lead him into homosexual activity. Combined with the absence of any women in their lives, the target often gives in to these advances as a sexual substitute. The use of homosexuality and the ensuing blackmail threat rely on the mental weakness or insecurity of the initiative. And if they refuse to give in, other methods will be employed to attempt to set the person up for blackmail in some way, or they may be subjected to greater degree of harassment as punishment. Satanic Undertones. Although little realized and often denied, there is a very well-established satanic underground that permeates society worldwide. It originates with the ultra-elite family bloodlines that have ruled Europe and America for centuries, but extends deep into the thick of today's society. Because induced MPD is very likely a requisite for full participation in the deeper satanic activities, and is used to keep those activities secret even from the participants themselves, it's very difficult to be sure what percentage of the population has been drawn into this satanic underground without their even knowing it. In considering this in relation to issues of gang stalking and mind control, it becomes fairly obvious that these two phenomena stem from satanic circles. By that I mean that they originate from the military and intelligence organizations, which is filled with people with very satanic leanings from the top down. Mind control technology is satanic in its very conception, and the trail of evidence of government involvement in this field of research and development shows that it is tied to the same generational families that have been heavily involved in Satanism for a very long time. Gang stalking is the reworking of an already established and well-used method of controlling a population by having the people police each other in a very repressive manner, as was used by the Stasi secret police in East Germany, the Gestapo, and the Russian KGB. Adolf Hitler had been deeply enmeshed in the occult, and the entire Nazi party was centered around satanic beliefs and practices. As was stated earlier, certain elite Americans were working hand in hand with the Nazis before and during the war, and with their help, thousands of Hitler's top scientists and engineers were funneled into the USA after the war through Operation Paperclip to be given new identities and serve in government positions. They brought with them many of their ideas for controlling populations, which included a great deal of knowledge that became the basis for the American mind control programs and citizen policing groups. The satanic leanings of these Nazis did not die when they were brought to the American soil, but were instead allowed to take new root and slowly creep throughout the government, becoming well established, particularly within the military and intelligence organizations. Because of the secrecy allowed within these and other government organizations based on the excuse of national security, this was not difficult to accomplish and keep hidden from awareness. Since the time that these Nazis were brought into the American government, those who were closely associated with them in the beginning have continued to operate within the same circles and have continued to establish greater means of control in government while whittling away the people's rights and freedoms in more and more draconian ways that leave us all at their greater mercy. The original basis of a free, democratic society has been usurped and is now merely an illusion that covers the true fascist, totalitarian dictatorship that is upon us today. Mind control and gang stalking are but two means to this end, providing the ability to turn the thoughts and actions of an involuntary public towards the desires of those who are in the process of establishing their absolute control over the rest of humanity. So I'm going to finish up here, folks. The devil is in the details. Vigilante stalking, organized stalking, the hidden evil, state-sponsored terror campaigns. So I hope everybody, I have to say, did you enjoy hearing this? Hopefully it validated some of your questions, your concerns. For those of you who are targeted, for those of you that have been brought into gang stalking, into stalking the targets, and for those of you who are unwitting or willing participants, I hope you have a better understanding of what is happening, why you are targeting people like me, and maybe you're not doing it of your own accord. How does that make you feel to think that there is a controller there controlling you to do what you do to me, setting you up? How does that make you feel, perpetrator? Are you doing it of your free will? These are questions only you can answer. Dig deep. Dig deep into your psyche, into your morals and values. And I pose that question to the targeted people out there. Tell me your thoughts on the perpetrators that are in your lives. Think hard. Do you believe that they are mind controlled? Do you believe that they are witting or unwilling participants? What about the other agenda, the blackmail, the coercion? Does it appear that there are other secret societies that perform these same rituals to entrap and blackmail people? Guess what, folks? I saw a video recently on YouTube. It was about the Playboy bunnies and Hugh Hefner. It wasn't as benign as you think. They weren't cute little bunnies. Many of those girls were forced to stand in high heels in compromising positions for very long periods of time without being paid. They were also set up to be in predicaments just as I described to you and recorded without them knowing it. And if they got out of line, those videos were made public to ruin them, these young, beautiful girls. The other person that did this was that Weinstein creature. He did the exact same things. This is going on in Hollywood. Yeah, it's called Hollywood for a reason. With the musicians, they're all set up in compromising positions to be blackmailed in the future if they get out of line. So I hope you hit the thumbs up on this, because I have a feeling that when it's finally posted, there's going to get a lot of thumbs down for the local people. And hopefully it will stay up for a while. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. I hope you enjoyed reading more of this book with me, Gang Stalking and Mind Control, The Destruction of Society Through Community Spying Networks by A.K.Forward. I'm going to sign off for now.